Then another point that he makes is that the text says it was, that I said it was written to the 7 churches. Well, I didn't say it. That's what the scriptures say. I think somebody even raised that point in the video. But here's the deal. He said that there is no biblical or historical proof that the message of Revelation was written 7 times and then sent to 7 churches. Why is it necessary to write the message 7 times to send it to each congregation? Why could they not have done what Paul told the disciples in Colossae? See, I never said that it was written 7 times and sent to 7 different churches. That's his straw man argument that he built. But all you have to do is read the text and you'll see something different. Now let's take a look at Colossians 4:6, just to give you an example. In Colossians 4:16, the Bible says, and when this letter has been read among you, he's writing to the Colossians, have it what? That letter that he wrote to the Colossians, have it also read in the church of the Laodiceans, and see that you also read the letter from Laodicea. So what we have here is Paul sent a letter to Colossae and a church that wasn't very far away. He sent another letter to Laodicea. And what he told them was, let the Laodiceans send their letter to Colossae and let Colossae send their letter to Laodicea. He didn't write the same letter to both churches and then tell them, in other words, write 2 letters, one to Colossae, one to Laodicea, of the same information. No, he wrote 2 different letters to each of those churches and yet told them to communicate it. Now, that's precisely what happens in the book of Revelation. If you read the text in verse 11, here's what it says: write what you see in a book, and send it to the 7 churches in Asia. Now, why couldn't they do what Colossae and Laodicea did? Send it to Ephesus. Ephesus then in turn sends it to the next church and to the next church until all 7 had access to it. Very simple. Doesn't mean that he had to write the same letter 7 times and send it to 7 churches. Very, very simple point. Now, then he makes the argument that there's no historical evidence that there were only 7 churches in Asia at the time the book of Revelation was written. Well, in a book, The Life and Writings of St. John by James M. McDonnell, Doctor of Divinity, and J.S. Howson, Doctor of Divinity, on pages 154 to 155, and the copy of the book that I have has pages numbered at the top and the bottom, and the ones numbered at the bottom are, in the 200. So I just selected the ones from the top in case you have the same book and you want to know what page it's on. At any rate, in the heading entitled, or the heading that's entitled, 7 Churches Only in Asia at the Time It Was Written. Now, these scholars said 7 churches only in Asia at the time it was written. I'm not saying it's true just because the scholars say it, but I'm showing you that there is documentation for that. Now, here's the quote from the book. He says, there appear to have been but 7 churches in Asia, that is to say, proconsular Asia, or that part of Asia Minor lying along the western seaboard when this book was written. It is dedicated to these 7 alone, by the careful mention of them one by name, as if there were no other churches. And he cites verse 4 and verse 11. To the 7 churches in Asia, the expression, the 7 churches, seemed to imply that this constituted the whole number, and hence affords one of the most striking incidental proofs in favor of an early date, which I know this guy rejects. There were but 7 churches, says Dr. Tillich, in Asia when the Revelation was written. Dissertations, etc., page 32. An earthquake in the 9th year of Nero's reign overwhelmed both Laodicea and Colossae, according to Pliny's history. And the church at the latter place does not appear to have been restored. As the 2 places were in close proximity, which is why Paul told Laodicea to send the letter to Colossae and Colossae to send the letter to Laodicea. What remained of the church at Colossae probably became identified with one at Laodicea. The churches at Thales and Magnesia could not have been established until a considerable time after the apocalypse was written. Those who contend for later dates, when there must have been a greater number of churches than 7 in the region designated by the apostle, failed to give any sufficient reason for his mentioning no more. That they mystically or symbolically represent others is surely not such a reason, end quote. And so he was saying that if the book were written later, there were more churches in that area of Asia than there were at the time the book purports to be written. And thus, John would have or should have mentioned more churches. He doesn't. And they cite that as proof that there were only 7 churches in Asia at the time the book was written.